Good afternoon, Drew, Nelson, Brent. I'm so excited that you decided to join me today as we talk about managing the crazy during the COVID pandemic. As we talked about, this is part of the One Crisis from Crazy campaign, and it's really important for us to be able to understand how we keep ourselves together during this time. I'm really thrilled that you are here to talk about the point around acknowledging the grief of this system. And so I'm really glad to welcome you. I met you some time ago as you spoke so eloquently on grief and your personal story around health and mental health, and you really were a blessing to me. So I'm glad to now have a personal relationship with you, and I know how talented you are when it comes to helping people move through the grief journey. So thank you personally, and thank you for those people that are going to be listening. Welcome. And I'm going to ask you to start just telling us a little bit about your practice, how you became to be known as the expert on grief and loss. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. I am the owner of the Green Project Counseling. I am located in Livonia. So grief, I guess, is something that we all definitely experience, but our culture tends to, I won't necessarily say shy away from it, but kind of distance ourselves from the term and the ability to be able to experience it in its fullness. And quite early on into my practice, a lot of it is what I was seeing. And so the moment that I could identify it, I wanted to know more about it. So then I went and got certified. So once I got my certification, it was one of the best things that I could have done for my private practice because it advanced me so far. And then I like to be able to bridge the gap between mental health and the community, and grief and loss and recovery in the community. And that certification it helped me that much more.
I like how you say bridge between grief and the community, grief and loss, and also recovery. And I didn't mention that earlier, and I know that that's a very important part of your practice, that it's not just the pathway of grief, but it's how you get and stay in grief recovery.
Yeah, we often think that a loss is permanent. Well, the loss is permanent. The intensity surrounding the loss doesn't have to be permanent. The way we internalize the loss doesn't have to be permanent. The relationship with our person that we lost, if your loss is related to a death, that intensity doesn't have to be permanent. You can move forward because the relationship changes, but your person may not be here, but they're still going to always be your person. So you still get to talk to them, you still get to include them, you still get to anticipate things. It just has to be reframed.
And I will tell you, I so appreciate it, a moment of personal disclosure. I so appreciate that you start the grief journey with your clients by having that conversation. That just because a person is physically gone doesn't mean that they are away from you, doesn't mean you don't still have that relationship. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure that that's something that's going to continue to serve you very well in your practice.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Let's talk a little bit about this pandemic we're dealing with. Tell us, it's a lot. Tell us a little bit about how you personally are handling the pandemic and your family. I know you're a wife and mom. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm dealing with it very well. I fortunately have the tools, and I'm using every tool in my toolbox, and then I'm searching for others because we have been ongoing now since March. And some of the things that I've done, I've had to redo, go back, revamp, and then create new ways to do it. My children, my daughter's doing much better than I would say anyone else because she's kind of a recluse with certain things. My oldest son is working. He's older. He's out of the house. He's 20 years old. So he's doing good. My concerns are different for him because he's out in the community with it, right? My youngest son is like, hey, I need my friends. And how long is this going to last? Right. He was giving countdowns to each and every date that we had for each time that we were supposed to relinquish shelter in place. Sure. And I just got to a point where I didn't have the heart to tell him, and I would just let the news tell him that it was going to be extended. And then when he came, I just held him. I said, I know you're upset. I know. Yeah. So acknowledging all of their losses. So my daughter was supposed to start her first job. She had already interviewed and was accepted and all of these things. And then everything ceased.
Sure.
So acknowledging it, not telling them things, dismissive statements like, well, it'll be okay, or you'll move on. We don't do that. So, you know, we listen and we let them cycle through what they need, and then let them kind of tell us what they need, and we support it. So, and it helps.
So, excuse the interruption. I want to go back to, you start out two things. One, you start out talking about you have the tools, which is awesome. Speak a little bit about the tools that you use for managing this pandemic or loss or grief. Talk a little bit about that.
I am diagnosed with anxiety. And in moments where I'm uncertain and the uncertainty goes on for a long period of time, my anxiety can increase.
Sure.
Tools for me are movement. And normally it's been, I have plenty of them depending on where I am. I can tell you some different tricks of the trade, but mainly like if I'm at home and I'm frustrated, it's movement. So movement and music. So the best thing that I've been able to do since everything was, you know, quarantine, is walk and listen to my music. And if I've walked a certain amount of, like to a certain point, and I still don't feel my anxiety decreasing, then I keep going. And then I may start off thinking 2 miles and ended up being 6. And then when I come back, like, it is what it is, because I walk until I feel like I can breathe again. And then I decide to come back home, because it helps me with my patience level, and everybody in the house is about at peak point.
And so, I'm thinking that we all have different tools that will work for us. So you have to have a toolbox with not only your clientele, but in your family. You've got children of 3 different ages, and you've got you know, your husband, yourself. So you've got to work people through a number of different tools to work through this time, right?
Yeah. The husband rides his motorcycle often.
Okay. You're a biker too, as I recall, aren't you?
I love them. I just ride the back of them. I don't get on the front just yet. They won't let me because I have the children. So
understood.
But yeah, so those are the things that that's one of the many ways that I do it. Reading helps me.
Sure.
When I'm not as anxious, then I can read. If I'm very anxious, then I can't, because I'm reading the same line over and over again.
Right.
I love podcasts. They keep me informed. They keep me direct and to the point. I have several ones that I love to go to. I can choose topics all across the board.
Okay.
And so it kind of brings the outside world into me, and it works.
Yeah, that really would help with the isolation.
Yes.
You also talked about acknowledging the grief in this period of time. And one of the things I wanted us to explore a little bit is recognizing that this is grief, right? What we're feeling.
Yeah, it's a reaction to loss. You know, grief is a normal and natural emotion and reaction to loss.
Sure. It's
not a pathological condition, and it's not a disorder. And we often think that loss is only loss of person, you know, death, but it could be the loss of your job, whether you were laid off or you had to make the decision to be laid off, you had to make the decision to leave that job. You can still grieve the things that you had to make the decision to do. You loss of freedom. We've been under quarantine. We've been told where we can and can't go and how we can show up when we get there. The things that we normally, like for myself, I normally grocery shop early Sunday mornings. That's something that's not available to me anymore.
You're not,
you know, I have to be considerate, to the vulnerable population. And it's all respectful, and I appreciate it all, but it definitely is a change. And there are moments when you fight being frustrated along with being understanding. And those are the moments you have to then pull out your tools. So that might be a moment I go for another walk. Like some things have to happen, or I'm listening to some new music. Like, so I do appreciate all of the artists that have been doing the live battles on Instagram.
That has been amazing.
Yeah, their calling really has got us through a bunch of different moments.
And I don't know if they even knew. I feel as if they did this because they needed something to do. And I don't know that they actually realize how impactful their work has been. I had the opportunity to do a few that really resonate. One was, they didn't even call it a battle, but Jill Scott and Erykah Badu that
If you don't come through with the love on that one,
oh, that was the most powerful thing. And how about this? I listened to that just 1 or 2 days, maybe a week after Girl Trek did a talk with Nikki Giovanni and Angela Davis, honey. When I tell you,
Nikki Giovanni, I had the absolute pleasure of meeting her.
Oh, tell me about it.
I have a book signed from her for that, her poetry that she put out. She did a reading at U of M, Dearborn, when I was in school there. Well over 10 years ago. I stood in that line so graciously, so humbly, so appreciative. She is the connection between myself and my mother, because my mother has always loved her. And I have that. Boy, when I stood in front of her, I trembled with so much.
I know you did. I know you did.
Yes, I did.
That was a beautiful experience.
Yes, I did. Yes.
And Angela Davis, and then the one just this weekend that I think broke everybody down was Kirk Franklin and Fred Hammond.
Okay.
They did a piece this weekend, and I'm telling you, it was amazing. And it was talk about music moving us through grief. In addition to just being where we are in this pandemic, and as you well know, and many of our listeners know, I lost my parents 6 months and 10 days apart. My mother October 7th, my father April 17th. And just, those waves of grief. I'm grieving mom, and then dad, and then my loss of freedom, and then this. And, at one point I had to be quarantined because I was exposed. My father had COVID. And so I say all that to say, when they say music is just a salve for the soul, that experience with Kirk Franklin and Fred Hammond was, I almost don't have words for it. When I'm talking tears and just emotion, and when I went back and looked on social media, I was not alone. The whole country that was part of that. Were you part of that? Had you seen that, or at least get the tape?
I have to wait and catch it on YouTube, because some of them I miss, and then I go back on YouTube and then I can watch them straight through.
Absolutely. So so music as a tool for grief, just to close that part of the conversation. I know, again, personally, that in your practice, you have you distinguish between what we know about grief and what we believe about grief.
We have so many notions that were modeled for us, not necessarily taught to us or taught to us about grief, that we got from we have from growing up, and they're not always. I'm not going to say that they're not true, because that's not what I mean. But what I mean is that they don't apply, or they don't necessarily fit. But you know how you've always done it this way, so you continue to do it that way because you're just not sure that there's another way to do it. And that's the thing that I like to challenge. So when you come, that's where we start, where we ask, like, who taught you, or who spoke to you about grieving? Who mentioned to you about death? How did you hear about your person dying? What do you know about these different things? Because majority of the time in those questions lies the stuck point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the story that we tell ourselves, and that narrative we commit to. And once we commit to it, we often even forget that we committed to the one thing, and we just build on top of that. And it's my pleasure to help lift those things up off of you to get to that one particular point. Because that aha moment is the greatest thing. It is the greatest thing for me. I never get tired of seeing it.
And if we're going into a place where, it's something that is so deep inside of us, and we just believe that about grieving, right? We believe it about death, and we believe it about loss, then like you say, everything that happens seems to support that point.
Because it's all that we choose to acknowledge.
Right. And having to shake that loose, so that you can think a different way, and just consider something different, because otherwise everything will support what you are holding on to.
Because it will be the only thing you look towards. It will be the only thing you look towards. As
we started, and the reason that you're here, and I'm again so thankful, is this topic is really about acknowledging the grief that is in this time and place, and not only acknowledging it, but being able to define it and to call it out and to challenge our beliefs about grief. I saw a meme or GIF, whatever we want to call it, on Facebook, and people were starting to say, "I'm stuck in the house. I'm stuck in the house. I'm stuck in the house." And someone said, "Let's challenge that. You know where I'm going." Instead of saying, "I'm stuck in the house," how about "I'm safe
in the house?" Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And then
just that replacement. Just that one replacement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Changes the way you think about things. So yes, we want to acknowledge that we are grieving loss. And even as we start to open the country back up, the country starts to open back up, we start to get back into the world, we have to go into the world differently.
Yes.
And we will have to go into the world having lost some things, right?
And possibly not being able to regain them.
Oh, say more about that, Drew.
Yeah. So there are going to be certain ways that we navigated this world that just aren't going to be acceptable or viable moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know for sure that social distancing will stay the way that it is.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but the awareness,
people, I need to hug someone.
The awareness of how things are transmitted has to.
Yeah.
Has to.
Right.
Washing your hands was something most people thought everybody understood. Mm-mm. Okay, so whether you did or you didn't, I think it's awesome that now everybody knows.
Now we know what it is. Right? Get it. Yeah. Right. And it doesn't mean that people are still going to do it. So we have to realize, go back to another point, one of the earlier points, we're not going to be able to control whether people wash their hands.
Yes, which means you're going to have more control over yourself and your boundaries.
Absolutely. Ooh, say something about that. The boundaries.
Yeah, there are going to be things that you possibly overlooked before that you're not going to be able to overlook now because, like the underlying health issues, you're aware of them. You're aware of what you bring back home. Before you might have been like, yeah, okay, that's just them and that's over there with, as long as they keep it over there. But the interaction and the crossover now is going to cause you to question and call out the people around you. So you're going to end up being, for a little while anyway, like that parent who catches their toddler coming out of the bathroom. It's like, did you wash your hands?
Right.
Did you wash your hands? I didn't hear that water. I don't smell that soap.
Right.
It's kind of going to be like that. Yeah, until we get to a point where we start to feel safe again.
Yeah. Which is also an important concept in grief, that feeling of safety.
Because when you have the stability snatched from up under you.
Yeah. And how do you start to rebuild that? How does one, in this place of grief, start to rebuild stability in the face of grief? Because we know it doesn't just, you wake up a week after the funeral and everything's fine, or you wake up, a week after you lost the job and everything's fine. How do you rebuild that stability or that sense of stability?
Well, the sense of stability, I believe, comes with consistency. You create a new norm. So I tell people all the time, normal is only what you do consistently, which is why everybody's normal looks different, because it's what everybody consistently does differently. So for instance, your grief is related to the death of a person, it shakes everything because the way that person interacted in your ecosystem is no longer interacting, right? So your norm has been disrupted. You'll fall into a new normal. It doesn't mean that you have to lose the notion of your person or the love of your person or interacting, spiritually with your person. Of course, not physically, but you fall into new patterns. And even if that new pattern is every Memorial Day you visit the cemetery, every birthday you visit the cemetery, every special occasion or holiday you visit the cemetery, it still now becomes your norm. So now it's a new normal, but now it's a new stability.
I get it.
It's something that you can now count on and you look forward to. And then giving you something to look forward to and something to count on, that just reestablishes all those things all over again.
Absolutely. I noticed, last couple questions, and this is something that just came to my head. I noticed, because I know the stages of grief, I noticed myself going through those in this pandemic, right? Let's talk about those stages of grief how do they look in this pandemic? Can you share a little bit about that?
I don't think there's really any specific way that they will look. I think more than anything, we see anger. And I think we discount anxiety. I think that is one big aspect of grief that not a lot of people hear enough about.
Sure.
Because you can be anxious with the unknown. And even those people that are okay with sudden changes, when it's at some point it needs to level off, and when it doesn't, you've gone too far, and this is just too many sudden changes. So now I'm anxious with the unknown, because there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to tell me how long the tunnel was.
I know, right? I can see it right. Now, how far away is it? Yeah.
And it's the pathway that causes the anxiety.
Sure.
And so not necessarily knowing that unknown, it breeds the anxiety earlier on in others and later in the rest of us, but it still happens. But the anger is what seems to be surfacing the most. And that's because most people can't say I'm scared. Or, I'm hurt. I lost some things. And then again, I'm scared. I don't know that I'll get them back.
Sure.
And so denial, we had denial for a while. You're not going to tell me I got to wear a mask.
I know, right? Right.
Then we got to the acceptance. Well, if that's what you say I have to do to go outside, then that's what I'm going to do.
And I'm going to buy some cute ones then. If I have to wear a mask, I'm going to buy some cute masks, right? That matches my outfits, right?
And again, that takes us right back to how the stability comes, because now that's our new normal. And so now, like you said, we're going to match it to our outfits. That's not a problem. So now I have this one, and this one. And much like a tie or much like a headscarf, it's going to be representative of my personality, of the mood that I'm in, of the things that I support. So we're going to take it and I'm going to make it my own.
Yeah. Make it my own.
The adaptation of it matters.
And that gives us a sense of stability.
And control.
Yes.
That's
how you move forward. I just thought I was acting out with this shop, and every time I'm turning around, I'm buying a mask, I like that mask, I like that style. But yes, that it's like, if this is how it helps me accept the reality. Right. So if I'm going to have to wear a mask, then I want a cute mask. I want a mask with, my sorority on it, or my high school, or my, some certain patterns or colors, so that I can feel good about it.
Or the awarenesses, like for mental health awarenesses that I support, or the different cultures, the different things. And it internally builds resistance. Resilience.
Sure, I got that. I got that. I know that it has been difficult for me. I'm an extrovert. I like to be out and about. I traveled, as you know, before this, 85% of the time for my work. And it has been a challenge for me to be at home. But then I decided that I was going to use some of my own conversation on myself and start exercising gratitude, like the earlier comment, not stuck at home, safe at home. When was the last time I asked myself, have I had this much one-on-one time with my daughter, who's in her, final fifth year, going into fifth year senior status in college? We have been thick as thieves this time. We have had the best time, Drew, and the connection and the bonding and laughing, silly, crying because she misses her grandmother and grandfather as much as I miss mommy and daddy, and so now I'm finding myself being very thankful for this time. I can't change it. So how about I change the way I look at it and how I receive it?
Gratitude, nothing better.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been really good. Last question I'll ask you, and I really appreciate you giving us so much of this time out of your day.
Absolutely.
What advice, and you may string some of the thoughts together or thread them through from earlier, what advice or pointers, tips might you give people who are dealing with grief in this pandemic? And whether it's caused by the pandemic or other griefs and losses that are not connected while we're sitting in the middle of this, what might your tips, tricks, words of advice be to them?
Well, first and foremost, because it's so near and dear to my heart, I'm always going to tell you to seek help if necessary, right? Even if you're like, I don't fit the category. I'm not suicidal. I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious. There's nothing like having an hour devoted just to you.
Absolutely.
Someone listening to you, right?
Yes.
Safe and secure.
Yes.
Let someone hold space for you, because you want to be able to be vulnerable, which is the biggest thing around grief, is the vulnerability. I want to be able to say that, yes, I'm grieving, but what am I feeling? Because the grief is that umbrella And so what's raining down on you? What's falling under that? Are you angry? Are you scared? Are you hurt? Are you everything at
all
once?
of that?
What's the hierarchy of it at the moment? How can we transition down to the lowest one for you? Maybe it takes 1 or 2 sessions, maybe it takes 3 or 4 sessions, but let's do this. But if that's not something that they're open to, right? And seek things like this right here. This video is awesome. Podcasts are awesome. Hang out on some counseling pages and some coaching pages on Facebook and on IG, and get some positive words. Take in different things. Don't just limit your social media as it pertains to COVID. We know it's there.
Turn to CNN and MSNBC. I say that out loud so I can hear it myself.
Yeah. You can give it a few days of a rest. You know
I can.
If the world blows up, you'll know.
I will know.
You're going to know, no matter where it starts. You're going to know.
Right.
Because sometimes we have to turn down the intensity for just a little while, because we start to detach, or we start to get too used to it. For lack of a better word. And so then it just doesn't move us anymore.
Desensitized.
Desensitized. And then it doesn't move us anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's not a good thing, So those are really good things. But more than anything, I would say we have so many tools to reach out to each other, even though we're not in front of one another.
Yeah, sure.
You use your voice. Keeping it to yourself and keeping it bottled up does not do anything for you or anyone else around you. So even if you just have to text somebody and say, hey, do you have like 5 minutes to have a conversation?
Sure. Gotcha. Drew Nelson Brent, I appreciate you so much. This was a really good conversation about how to manage the crazy during the pandemic. As I mentioned, it's a part of the One Crisis from Crazy series, and this point has been about acknowledging the grief. And so who better could I have gone to than grief and loss and recovery expert, Drew Nelson Brent. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm reminded that it's time for me to call your office and get back in to see you. Thank you.
I'm waiting on you.
I know you are. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Take care.